So starting the presentation, good and proper, you are at the right one. If this is the subject matter that you expected to go over today, the webinar is on switching to Google Analytics 4, and we're going to cover the main things that you need to know. The different subject areas, I've written them all down here, and there's, as you can see, there's quite a lot to cover. What I've tried to do is to make sure that we're covering the most important things right up at the top, and towards the end, things like UTM tracking and Microsoft Clarity, they're bonus material. So it really, so that they are there, and if we don't cover them or have time to cover them in the webinar, then I will do separate videos that I'll make sure that everybody gets as well, because they're kind of small nuggets of information that are worth knowing about, but they're not as important as, you know, the stuff that you signed up for. So there's a few different bits to go through. So before we actually get into the details of Google Analytics and the tools, I'm aware that we could get into a lot of technology and kind of get away from the point of marketing measurements. And I want to draw everybody's attention to, as we move through the tools, why they're being used, what's the point of these marketing measurements. The whole point of marketing measurements are to continuously improve how your marketing funnel performs for you, how your marketing works for you, and to look to do things better. So there's a lot of data in Google Analytics, Universal Google Analytics. The same will be the case, if not more so, with this new one. It is very easy to get bamboozled with all the data, but really we're looking to find the insights that are actionable, that can direct what we do. So with any of the tools that we go through, bear in mind what will be valuable to measure. We will be talking through the digital marketing measurement model. Managed to say that, but I won't say it 3 times fast, and a marketing funnel assessment towards the end, which helps to make a bit more sense of these tools and to help find the place in your organization and in your marketing practices. But consider as we go through what your customer journey is, and therefore then what needs to be measured. So that's just a word at the beginning. So as some of you might already be aware, but this is really so that we are all at the same starting point, this little kind of overview. Google Analytics has been around for a long time, it's free and it will continue to be free. But Google redeveloped Google Analytics from the ground up and moved to GA4. But obviously, nobody seems to want to move over. And I think it's just, and I resisted it quite heavily, because things that I could find quite easily before didn't seem as easy to access. They are there, they might be talked about in a different way, and I think that the tool is continuously being developed. So they've put a deadline on when we are going to be able to get a continuous data coming in. So on the 1st of July, any Universal Analytics property will stop receiving data. And I will now, throughout this presentation moving forward, GA4 is Google Analytics 4, the new one, and UA is Universal Analytics, which is the one that will become defunct, because it's just the presentation got a lot longer having to write those in full. So I hope that that's clear. So your Universal Analytics account on the 1st of July will stop receiving any data from your website. However, you will be able to continue to access that data for 6 months. This is a little bit frustrating, I suppose, to only have it for 6 months, because often what you want to be able to do is to compare data on a year-on-year basis. It is, for most businesses, particularly those that are seasonal, although as nobody here is retail or hospitality, you won't find extremes quite so much, but it's better to compare April one year to the previous year rather than comparing April to March or April to November. You are going to get a more representative picture. That's going to be difficult, but it's just one of those humps I think we just have to get over. They are encouraging you to export your data from Universal Analytics, but that would be really hard to kind of measure or kind of manage. So interesting. What you can do, and you've been able to do for ages, is that you can have both tracking tools on your site. You can have UA and you can have a GA4. However, you don't want two UAs, not that you should be doing that at this point anyway, or two different accounts of GA4, because they kind of screw with the data, like it kind of goes a bit wrong. So there's absolutely no harm to, if you're, if you want June's data for UA, then you can do and have this crossover. And a lot of people have been running both sets of tracking on their website for a while. And the last sort of bit is, if you have a universal analytics property, then the odds are that GA4, a GA4 property has been made for you. However, that does not mean that it's tracking. You need to, and we'll go through the steps for migration, adding and stuff like that. So there is a little bit of tailoring that needs to be done within Google Analytics, which we'll go through, and then the tracking code does also need adding. So that's an overview of the situation, but we're going to go through what's the same and what's different and what's better about GA4, so that everybody understands a bit more about the tool. So what's the same, you can measure exactly the same things, but they might be called different things and they might be in different areas. So everything you can measure in UA, you can measure in GA4. And you can also run all of the same reports. How you go about them, it kind of has changed a little bit. The things that are different, some of this is a little bit boring, honestly, like it's trying to pull out why it matters. But because GA4 delivers events or measures in events, it affects things like conversion rates, but it monitors things slightly different by focusing on user behavior. The main, I think, benefit that I've seen, or it seems as if GA4 has really been developed for people who have maybe got apps and they need to be able to track people across the internet. At the end of the day, an online presence now isn't just about having a website. It is about your social media presence. It's about having an app. It's about all these other things. So from what I can gather, the whole purpose of creating Google Analytics 4 is making it so that cross-device tracking is easier to do. And unfortunately, that's not particularly relevant for us here today because no one else has got an app. But it does mean that there's a lot of the fuss around GA4 might kind of go over your head because the tools that you use are pretty much exactly the same. But there are some benefits. One of them is that Universal Analytics relies on cookies to track user behavior, which is a bit of an issue when it comes to things like GDPR and the e-privacy update or whatever. Technically, what you're supposed to do when somebody arrives on your website is to ask for explicit permission before serving any kind of cookies, particularly third-party cookies, which is what UA, like Google Analytics UA, is. So what that means is that a lot of people will either deny all or accept all or whatever. Because it's non-essential, that means that all of a sudden that person, you're not going to see what they're doing. But you've got no way of kind of receiving the data for that user, and it could happen quite a lot. So if you do as you're supposed to, that means that the amount of data that you're getting suddenly kind of drops, which is a bit of a shame, particularly because you're not trying to, I don't know, violate somebody's privacy, one would hope, or to kind of know on a person by person basis. You just really want to know how people behave so that you can hopefully improve their user experience and kind of tailor your website to suit them. However, with GA4, they're not doing that anymore. So I think that we get, we also don't need to worry. Is my handset still working? My microphone still working? I've just got these weird notifications on screen.
Something changed, but I can still hear you.
If you can still, okay, that's great. Yeah, apparently my AirPods started to do something. Okay, so carry on. What that should mean is that data that we receive is better, and also we don't need to jump through so many hoops in order to get the data. Essentially, we don't need to worry quite so much, which is great. We've also got much more flexible, customized reporting that can be a bit bamboozling, but once you've identified what you want to report on, that's great news, because you could probably find it in a way that you can't do with Universal Analytics. They're also being a bit more positive about how they report on engagement. A bounce rate, if you don't know, A bounce would be if someone arrives on a website and they leave on the same page that they arrived on. They could be on that page for 20 minutes, but if they leave on that same page, it's considered a bounce. Whereas engaged sessions are more about how long somebody is on the website or page views. So for example, an engaged session, that person who is on a page for 20 minutes and leaves on the same page would be considered to have engaged, which I think is a more accurate rather than a bounce, which is more accurate and helpful. So they're really looking at indicators of positive kind of engagement with the site rather than it being clear cut. And they also measure goals in GA4 it's conversions instead of goals, which we will talk about in a little bit. So those are things that are different, or the main things. What we've also got is some predictive metrics, which look quite cool. They're really going to be helpful for the e-commerce companies, but not so much the service-based amongst us. So while these predictive metrics around e-commerce don't feel that positive right now, I think it's a sign of things to come, because what they're trying to do is to predict behavior or predict what could happen if things are changed. So I think there'll be more of this kind of thing coming. There's a better product integration. I've always found that Google Analytics integrates with most things anyway. You'd expect them to integrate well with the Google products. I don't know what they'll be playing at if not, but things like MailChimp, Zero, just all these different software, it's going to continue to integrate well. And I've already mentioned the privacy-centric data collection. Obviously, we all care about protecting people's privacy, but it's built in to be easier for us to manage, and I think we're going to get better quality data in the end. So moving on to the migration, I'm not going to do a step-by-step walkthrough of the migration, because the path that you need to take is dependent on a range of factors, and it could be different for almost everybody who's with us right now. What I will do is give you the questions that you need to ask and the path that you need to go down, or what needs to be done in each scenario, which I hope will be more constructive. Also, there are tons of walkthrough videos and tools that will give you kind of more granular, click on this button, scroll down here, or whatever, and a lot of it's built into the Google Analytics tool. So if you haven't migrated already, the first question to ask is, have you already got Google Analytics installed on your website? Have you got an account? And I'll explain how to identify that in the next slide. The next question is, do you have access to that Google Analytics property? So say you have got Google Analytics on your website, but you need to get into the property, into the actual account. I'll talk you through that. And is your access high enough in order to get in there? Then the last bit is actually getting the code onto your site. So the first question is Google Analytics added to your website. You will get this as a recording, and I can also send over the PDF so that you can kind of click on links and stuff like that. In order to figure out, this is the easiest way to find out. If you have WordPress, you can log in and see if there is a plugin, but there are so many different plugins that it can actually sometimes be quite difficult to drill down. And just because you've got WordPress doesn't mean that somebody's used a plugin. Your developer might have added it into heading code, which may or may not be visible. So you could end up exploring around your WordPress website, think you don't have Google Analytics installed, and you do, just because of the way that it's been added. You also probably need to figure that out, because you'll need to kind of remove the old code at some point. You do want to know the method, essentially. But if you go to your website, you could just right click anywhere on the page, not on a button, just on a little bit of space, and view page source, which I've highlighted on the right here. You can see the different apps that I've also got on my computer. And then once you're in this code kind of view, you can press Control F, which will pop up a little search thing. Now, these are the kind of things that you will need to look for, because if it's Universal Analytics, then make sure you do put this little hyphen there, because otherwise you're going to get every word that's got U and A in it, and you're kind of going to go through, but this hyphen does make a difference. Same thing with GTM and G hyphen. So UA is for Universal Analytics, GTM is for Google Tag Manager, and G hyphen is for the most recent version, is for GA4. And what you'll find is something that looks like what you can see highlighted in the code. You can see what our Universal Analytics property is. Something to bear in mind is, if you see two of these UA hyphens and the numbers after it are different, then it means that you've got it installed twice. If you get two of them and the number's the same, that's fine. but just be aware of that your previous measurements are going to be off. Sometimes it reports data twice, sometimes it reports it not at all. So it's not even predictable. You can't even take the stats and say, okay, well, I'm going to half it. So that will let you know what you've got in place and if it's already there. If you've got the G-, then that suggests to me that GA4 is already there and tracking, which is really positive. But it could be something that has been done for you. So the next question to ask once you know whether you've got analytics or not is whether you've got access to the property. So if you haven't got Google Analytics on there, then obviously we're going to go through the same steps but you might have to be creating the property from scratch. But I think a lot of people have probably already got it. They just haven't moved over. The different places you can go to log in, go to analytics.google.com or to tagmanager.google.com. I would always start with analytics.google.com and just log in with just try logging in, ask anyone who might have access. This might be someone who's more technical in your company, it might be your website developer, it might be your hoster, and it might be that they've set up Google Analytics for you, but just not giving you access as a user. So if you're in that situation, you are, by rights to be added as a user, at least on the property level. In order to add you as a user, what they'll need to do is to get a Google account email from you. And a Google account email doesn't need to be a Gmail address. You can set it up as your main company address. One of the main issues I actually find when people are trying to log in to a Google account is that nobody knows the random Gmail address that was set up in order to access Google Analytics years ago. And that's the same case with Search Console. So if you are starting this process now and you have to produce a Google account so that you can be added and everything else, then honestly just create Google account. And what you are going to do is to get to a screen that looks like this little image on the left. And I would recommend clicking on use my current email address instead. So that means you can create a Google account without needing it to be attached to a Gmail. What they want to do is to create a Gmail. The Google overlords want to create a Gmail account for you. But don't let them. So I mean, it's pretty well hidden. Like I've definitely seen notes that are easier to find. So this process is very dependent on how things were set up in the first place. But I want to make a quick note about Google Tag Manager because it will be relevant very soon. Google Tag Manager is a way of managing tracking codes. It's not Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager. I would say that if you have a relationship with your website developer or designer where it takes a long time to receive an update and you're going to want to add different tracking codes and edit them, then it's worth adding in Google Tag Manager, because what you'll do in that situation is instead of each time you want to or use this opportunity to do this, because what it means is they add Google Tag Manager once, and then you can manage via your Tag Manager account which tracking codes are added or removed or whatever. And this includes Google Analytics, but it also could include an AdWords account, a Facebook pixel, or any other tracking that you want to deploy on your website. Say you wanted to change all those three, all you're asking your developers to do is to add in the Google Tag Manager thing once rather than making them change things 3 times. With some developers, they do have a habit of editing things. Maybe they don't deploy it properly. You test it, it's not working, it's got to be changed again. A ticket, if they're not responsive again, it's another 2 weeks, which can be quite frustrating. So if you have that kind of relationship with your developer, it is worth having Google Tag Manager in place. However, it is a different subject to get used to. And for me, and I don't actually like it, but that's because we just update websites, which is what I hope for you. But it's a tool that can be used just in case you've kind of heard of it before. It's not instead of, it's potentially as well as, and you can manage things that way. So it's really not worth it if you can just change code quite easily. Is what I'd say. Save the time for learning more about Google Analytics. So we're getting as far as installing the tracking code itself. Hopefully you've logged into your account and you can see what is shown on the right hand side. These columns are the way that any kind of Google Analytics property shows. Actually the third one, I'm lying, with Google Analytics 4, the third column view isn't there anymore. It's just 2 columns. But what you will need to do is to make sure that you've selected from the drop down the right account if there are multiple accounts, and the right property if there are multiple properties already in there. and go to the right one. With this example that I've shown on the right hand side, it's a Universal Analytics account. You can tell because it says Analytics Menu Demo and it says U8. And there you've got this GA4 setup assistant that you need to go through. So even if you've added the tracking code, it doesn't mean the setup is finished. It's still worth going in there. But also the image that you can see probably at the bottom of the screen, the little red kind of banner, that's going to be shown until you've gone through the process and kind of completed the whole setup. So we're going to cover that shortly. Adding the code to the website can be done in multiple ways. I've said about the plugin code or Google Tag Manager, and then you kind of want to run through the wizard. So I'll just show you the different steps for A, finding the code, and then B, the different setups that you need to do and conversions and events and stuff like that. This is what the setup assistant looks like. And as you can see, where you can see data collection, on the right hand side, you can see data flowing. This is what you would see if the code has been added to your website effectively and if it's working. So we want that. If, however, it's not, it means that the GA4 property has been produced, but the tracking code has not been added or something is wrong with it. So what you do is click on the right hand side and you will get a great wizard, varying different ways that you can get the code and get things included. So you could get the code and send it to your developer, and there is also quite a comprehensive list of kind of walkthroughs for every different CMS that there is going, whether it's WordPress or Magento or Wix or whatever. There is a tutorial there to help you, so I don't need to go into those details, I don't think. Then scrolling a little bit further down, these are the kind of things that you have to go through in order to get rid of that banner. So turn on Google Signals, you just have to go through the process. It's a wizard, and conversions, which we'll talk about shortly. Once you've done each area, so you can click into manage Google Signals, go through a wizard, but you do have to mark it as complete to get rid of that banner, which may or may not matter to you, but that's the way of kind of getting rid of it and walking through the steps. So I want to talk about conversion tracking, and the reason, and as I imagine you probably want to hear, Google Analytics has always been very good at assessing how somebody behaves on a website, the user behavior, how many clicks, how many whatever else. But what it doesn't know until you tell it is what a successful visit on the website looks like to you. So you have to tell it what a goal is or what success looks like, and that's what setting up a goal look like in Universal Analytics and what conversion looks like in GA4. So zooming back out to your website, your funnel and whatever else, you need to think about, okay, well, what does that look like? There are also, because Google Analytics does event tracking, a lot of these things might be caught automatically, but it's not considered a conversion unless you say, yeah, do you know what, if somebody does this, I'm going to consider this to be a successful visit to the website. I actually might just skip ahead to just show you, because I think it's helpful with that kind of context. So this column on the left hand side is where you've been seeing everything else that we've been showing. It's just a little bit further down. If you click on events, you can see all these things that are automatically being tracked. If you've only just set up your GA4 account, they're not going to be there yet. You need to leave it to run for like a month or something like that, or a particularly active week, depending on how many visitors you get, in order for things to start kind of coming through. With a service-based business, what you'll find is that mail to, which I've highlighted, and tell are the events that you really probably do want to mark as conversion, because mail to means that someone's clicked on an email link. It's a really good indicator of somebody getting in contact with you, and tell is somebody clicking on a telephone link, which usually only happens on mobile, but it can happen on desktop too. So those are events that it is worth marking as conversions, and it is as simple. You just pull that over, pull the dial over on the right hand side, and that will be marked as conversions, and it will be showing on your report. The reason why this matters is because if you do anything like AdWords, then you really want to connect the Google Analytics conversions, because what that then means is that Google AdWords has been told via conversions what success looks like to you, and the artificial intelligence behind AdWords, or Google Ads, as they've been rebranded probably for about 5 years now, but I'll get it eventually. They then will try to increase that behavior. So it will be engineered, or the ads will be engineered around increasing that. So you're giving it crucial intelligence. but that's probably a subject for another day. Anyway, so going back to this macro versus micro, I've just demonstrated two things that are probably about the even level, right? So filling in a contact form would be about the same level. However, if somebody filled out and subscribed to my newsletter, I wouldn't consider that to be as clear an indicator of success. It's a successful visit, that's easy for me to say, but it's not going to have so much of an impact on my business. So I need to make a decision about whether I would consider that to be a conversion or not. You can add as many different conversions as you, I think there's a limit of like 30 or something like that. And even if you add all of them, it would be possible to drill down to particular types of conversions. So to only see a report that talks about telephone, somebody clicking on telephone or whatever. However, you just kind of need to think about whether you're going to treat everything the same, because not all conversions are the same. Now, if you, for example, if somebody clicking on a particular email, or maybe somebody visiting a particular page is a mark of success for you, then you're probably going to have to create an event, and that is where you kind of customize what's there already. In order to do that, you need to go to that same events area, click on create an event, and you're going to need to take data from the previous page. So I'm going to try and not spend too much time here, because I don't think a lot of people might not be quite here yet. But this event name that you can see further down, I've added the custom event name. It has to have an underscore. You can't have spaces in these things. The parameter, you would select event name. If I go back, you can see on the left-hand side of this table, event name, it shows what's there. And page view is kind of the standard event that happens every time that somebody's on a website. The page view is the main one. So that's where I've taken the value that's on the right-hand side. So if what we're saying is, if in the situation where somebody views a page, then we modify it further. So we'll add another row and say, but I also want it to be this particular page. When you start to write in parameter, a drop down appears. So if you start to write page or PA, then you'll get some choices. And I honestly, at this point, don't know what all of them are. That's a Google, there'll be a guide. So what does, page, well, I do know what page location is, it's URL, but there's going to be an awful lot of things that you might just have to check what the event name means, because this is all new. But what I've done is, in the situation where the page name contains the words thank-you, I would regard that as a conversion. So that's what I've, as an event. And then you do need to go, once the event has been created, you do still need to go through the step of saying, not only is this an event, I consider it a conversion. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of how things can be tailored. It really does depend on what you want. For example, if it's a particular email address, you want to mark that as a conversion. It wouldn't be event name, it would be mail to equals or contains the email address. Then I consider that to be an event and a conversion. So that's a little bit of a customization there to mark success. So some final bits around the other tools that you might as well do while you're in here. Google Search Console is different from Google Analytics in that it doesn't, where Google Analytics reports on data. Can I just check everyone can still hear me? Yeah, okay, that's fine. I just opened my AirPods thing, and often that connects onto the computer, which is a really stupid thing to do while you're in the middle of a webinar. But anyway, so Google Search Console, unlike Google Analytics, is more about how your site shows in search engines, and it gives you some really helpful information about if there are any issues indexing your website. So if you've got a Google Search Console account, you will get an email from Google to tell you, we're having issues with this particular page, you're maybe on mobile, your text is too small, and it gives you an opportunity to do something about it. It's a two-way communication with Google, which is great, isn't it? Because in a lot of situations, what you want is to kind of improve things. So they work with you in this way. And it is possible to connect your Search Console information with Google Analytics. So Google Search Console, the kind of information it gives you is where you're showing in search engines for particular terms, how many times you showed when people searched for those terms in the past month, your click-through rates, how many clicks you got, and what pages people went to, which is not the kind of thing that's in Google Analytics. However, the two bits of information together are really helpful. For example, what used to be possible, I'm really hoping will happen again now that the privacy thing is kind of hopefully going to be resolved, is that you could find out for a particular search term how many times you showed in search, your click-through rates, and then the people who actually came through to your site for that term, the quality of that traffic based on how long they stayed on your website, how many pages they went to, and if you set up your conversions, how many times they converted. So that is kind of a fuller picture of behavior, which is really, really valuable. To connect the two accounts, you need to check that you've got an account set up. So that's the first thing to do, to go to this page with search-console, log in with the same Google account information. It needs to be the same. If you think your Search Console account is attached to a different Google account, then you need to add yourself as a user or to connect them. So that needs to kind of align. Once you know that the Google Search Console account is there, then you can run through, just click on this link. It's the same column that I've been referring to the whole time in Google Analytics. It's just at the bottom for some reason. You just carry on scrolling down on the column that's got the setup wizard. If you don't have a Google Search Console account, go to that same place, log in with the account. There's a wizard there. It's so easy to get through. You put in your URL, it takes 5 minutes, and then you'll be able to go through this wizard. So it's not a problem at all. If you think there might be one somewhere that you just haven't been given access to, you can ask the same person that was possibly holding your Google Analytics data to add you, and then you can connect it. So that's just an added little bit that I think is really helpful. It's also worth having to be getting alerts from Google Search Console, because if there's an issue with your website, you want to know what's happening in search, don't you? So it's well worth doing. I'm going to go on to this custom reporting, but it could be a webinar by itself. So I think the subject to really think about, again, zooming out as to what you really want to understand each quarter, month and week does require zooming out. What does success look like, and what measurements will provide insights? I'm going to briefly go over the digital marketing measurement model, which will help you to define it. But a quick word on vanity versus clarity metrics. A vanity metric is it might be stuff like how many views you got of your website in a particular month. So somebody might rush to you and say, we've doubled the amount of views on our website over the past month. Isn't that great? If you then find out that that's mostly people coming from Sri Lanka and you only serve the United Kingdom, it's not. Or if it's robots or spam or something like that, which probably won't happen quite so much now because GA4 kind of blocks those things out of your data. But you really do need to drill down, like, where are they coming from? What are they doing? Are they bouncing immediately? Are they going to this one blog that doesn't really represent who we are, and then are they leaving? So you really need to analyze that kind of thing. Whereas a clarity metric is going to be far more connected to your business operations. And in order to get clarity metrics, a lot of the time you've got to do the work around setting up what conversions are and defining what success looks like. So these are things that take a bit more time. But once you know what they are, it means that you can ignore the data that is often bamboozling and overwhelming. So in order to drill down and kind of find these measurements, this is a model provided by Avinash Kaushik, who is a data god, worked in Google for ages. A lot of the time when trying to figure out the right marketing measurements, we get stumped because the marketing department doesn't talk to the people higher up, even if that is you. Even if you are the business owner and you're doing the marketing as well, sometimes just thinking, okay, what is it actually that I'm wanting to achieve in the next 12 months? What does it look like? So there's a business objective, and then there's getting more specific about goals, which I'm going to give you an example shortly with an e-commerce example, and then writing out the key performance indicators, what measurements that actually take. So you might need to talk to the data person at that point about right, well, what measurements are, this is what we want to get reports on, this is our objective, how do we report against this? And then they'll be able to tell you. And then it's a case of drawing a line in the sand, setting up targets, by this date, what do we want to achieve? This just feels very wordy, but in practice, this is what it might look like. So an objective for an e-commerce website might be to increase sales, but the goal will be around that method of increasing sales. So it might be increasing conversion rate for the people on the website. It might be increasing customer spend per customer. It could be increasing returning customers. or encouraging stuff. And as an aside, any of these goals have got a different impact on your marketing strategy. If we wanted to increase conversion rates, we might want to remove things that are distracting. It might be about speed optimization. It might be about flash deals. Whereas if you're wanting to increase customer spend per customer, then you might want to put bundles together that create savings, or suggest products that go with the thing that they bought, like 95% of people who bought what you're buying also bought this thing, kind of a thing. So what that then means, and that's kind of a website design thing, but if you wanted to increase, you know, repeat customer, it might be around an email marketing campaign, like a birthday offer or something like that. So there will be an impact, obviously, on your marketing strategy. But the actual measurement for those things are different. Conversion rate would be for the increased conversion rate, average order value. I know it just feels like I'm repeating myself, but if you were doing an email marketing campaign, then click-throughs, engagement, that sort of thing on your email, and there's a good integration between Google Analytics and MailChimp to help you kind of do that. You need to pick out what their reporting looks like, and then outline a target. So where we are now, where do we want to be, within what time frame? Draw a line in the sand. It depends on how ambitious you want to be, and if you're going to get in a lot of trouble for not reaching it. So that's really how you go about it. Have a look at where you are now, and then try and increase things, and obviously then speak to your marketing department, even if, again, that is also you, about how you're going to go about getting the goals achieved. So we've still got a few minutes to go, so we've got time for this bonus material. UTM tracking is something that we've used a few times with our clients, particularly with hospitality, any kind of print literature. What it means is that you are setting up tracking for a particular campaign, and it allows you to differentiate between people who might visit that website page generally just because they're browsing, and those who are getting to it because of a particular thing you're doing, whether that's an email campaign, or it could be, for example, a QR code on a menu. So it doesn't have a particularly good name. You know, it's not one of those kind of snazzy things that help, but you can go to a campaign builder and fill out a form, and it will just spew out a URL for you. That's the Google kind of website to do. These are the things that you're going to need to fill in. So the URL that somebody's going to, the source, the medium, the campaign name. And then it'll give you this horribly long URL, but you can shorten it within the tool, to be honest, into a bit.ly thing. And then you can use a QR code generator in order to then make sure that if anyone scans the QR code, it shows up in your analytics tools and you're able to kind of drill down on it. Word of caution, QR code generators, if you just Google it and use the first one that they've got, some of them have this habit of saying, oh, it's fine, we'll generate a code for you. It's a 14-day free trial. And when the trial's ended, it's, you know, you can't get access to that code anymore. It stops working, you know, when it's already on 200 leaflets. So you could always pass on the URL to your developer, to your designer, who has probably got more reliable tools for generating QR codes. Just be careful about what service you use to generate a QR code. They can be a bit funny. The very last tool I want to go over is Microsoft Clarity, which is a really powerful tool for user experience reporting, and it is different from Google Analytics, but of course you can integrate the two together. The kind of things that it reports on is heat maps. It can show you recordings of what people have done. You can see rage clicks, which is when people are doing that, which you've possibly all done at some point, excessive scrolling, kind of errors. It allows you to analyze user experience in a way that Google Analytics doesn't, but you can also kind of combine the data. It is free. It's a free tool from Microsoft, and even if you don't have a Microsoft account, you can log in with your Facebook or your Google login. So why not? While you're adding this code, add in as well and integrate them, and there's a wizard. So it can be, it's just so easy to do, and it's really, really interesting watching people use it. So I definitely would recommend, while you're at it, add Microsoft Clarity as well. So yeah, just 1 minute over. I'm wrapping up. So my very last thing to say is, hopefully this presentation has made you think about your funnel about how your marketing is performing, how people, how potential customers use your website. And if you think that maybe your funnel might need a little bit of tightening up, then we've got a marketing funnel assessment that will allow you to identify your leaks, and we'll make sure that we share the link afterwards. It will take 5 minutes or less to fill out, unless you really spend a long time on the questions. It's 21 multiple choice questions, so we don't need an essay or anything. It's free, and you get a tailored report with recommendations, and these are the kind of areas that they look at to assess. Measurements is obviously one of them, which is the reason why I think it's relevant, but these other activities also impact how your marketing funnel behaves and performs for you. Here are the resource links, but I think that, again, like I said, that we're going to send these things over to you. So I think now it's time for a Q&A, if there are any Qs to A.